Hey, folks. How's everyone doing?
Doing well. How do you do?
Very well, thanks. Hey, Ilya.
Hey everyone.
Hey. So I hope people don't mind. I thought I'd record the meeting today just so we got a record of Ilya's demo. Let me know if you object. Guess let's give it a couple more minutes. Hey, folks. Okay. Can I suggest that we try and cover some of the other topics before we move on to the demo, just because it means that people who are a little bit late will get to see the demo. So I guess the first topic is 32102. I just wanted to flag this because it looks like Ilya found a bug. Oh, hey, Mike. Looks like Ilya found a bug which needs fixing in kubelet. Hopefully we can get this into 1.4. Hey, Joe.
Hello.
Any commentary on 32102? Ilya, do you want to describe what the problem was and how it's fixed? Oh, Ilya, you're on mute.
Yeah, the kubelet bug. So the thing is that we introduced the require kubeconfig flag, which was PR from Clayton, and essentially we got that. But what was left is that there's still the standalone mode detection, which is based on the number of API server flags passed in. So so that's still passing kubeconfig and require kubeconfig and not passing any API server flags, which is obviously what we want to do, right? It sets kubelet into standalone mode, and that means it doesn't look at the API server for. It actually registers with the API server, but it doesn't look for updates to its own metadata in node info, right? So that is kind of a little silly. And the problem where this surfaces is when I update labels on master, like labels and annotations on master, and then I try to use affinity expression on kube discovery to pin it to master. And what scheduler thinks is that, hey, I mean, this should be running on this node called master, right? And then master says, well, no, actually the kubelet says, well, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm not taking this pod. And it just sits there forever, refusing to run the pod.
Okay, so it looks like a pretty simple fix in the PR. I guess my concern was just making sure that we were okay to get this merged into 1.4 because it's a bug rather than a feature.
I mean, that seems reasonable. We'll have to obviously
convince Phil, the 1.4 release czar, to take it. So I think it's such a minor change that it shouldn't be a problem.
Okay, great. Can anyone volunteer to review the patch?
Yeah, can you ping me on it when you send it out if it's not sent out?
It's there already. I think it, Mike.
Yeah, it's
All
also
right.
linked from the release notes. It's like literally a 10-character change.
All right, sure. I'll take a
Awesome.
look today.
Thank you. Much obliged. Cool. Are we aware, is anyone aware of any other blockers for getting the good user experience that we want into 1.4? Okay. I guess we'll discover them as we go. Great. So the next item on the agenda then is Ilya is ready to do a full end-to-end demo, which is very exciting, of the init and join workflow. I haven't seen this yet, so I'm really excited. Take it away, Ilya. And you're on mute again.
Yeah. So so I'm going to show how. So previously we demoed kubeadm in the manual bootstrap mode, where we copied CA cert from master to other machines, and after that we worked together with a few other folks, actually, Devon and Paolo more recently, and also Evgeny helped out with a few little features. So Devon wrote the bigger piece here, which is the discovery service, which is like an implementation of the JWS proposal that the job put together, and we've got that working. So I'm going to show that. Okay, so we're going to be using DigitalOcean again, just to keep it neutral, I suppose. So I guess, what am I sharing? No, entire screen. Okay, let's see. Can people see my browser? Yeah. Okay. So I've got like 4 droplets in DigitalOcean. It's Ubuntu 16.04, and I've used this tiny little user data script, which is super simple. I had actual difficulties with getting Docker package installed in another way, and even this didn't quite work. I still had to run this. Lots of fun with packages. Okay, let's just jump in. So here I've got a machine that I'm intending to make master. I just found a little breakage in the a change that it kind of slipped through is that the certificates endpoint has changed slightly in master versus beta 3. So I've got to use my own image that has hypercube binary in it. And one other thing I've got is this. Is maybe some of you saw it. I was pinging people on Slack about it. I've built this little installer container, which basically you just do this, right? You use a local mounted as target, and I just run this, and this will spew out the kubelet, kubeadm, and the kubectl binaries into user local bin, the CNI binaries, and the systemd unit, and it will print a message, what should I do next? Okay, I just rebuilt it, so fingers crossed it works. So yeah, this is just a temporary solution for those who want to try kubeadm. And right now, kubelet required a fix, so I couldn't tell people to download beta 3 binaries anymore, blah, blah, blah. So hey, so here it printed all the binaries that it installed into user local. And yeah, so just so that people are aware of what it does. So next it says you should do this. Okay, cool, let's do that. Obviously we are shooting systemd here, right? But hey, is that all? Well, I can also do systemd status kubelet, and you can see it's failing right now. As I said, it's in a crash loop, right? And and I don't have to do sudo actually. Kubeadm is already root. Kubeadm init is going to create PKI assets, kubeconfig files, and it's going to wait it's going to create the static pod manifest as well as it did before, and then it waits for the API server. API server comes up, and yeah, it sort of just waits for that to make sure that the client it has is a working one, and then it does a few checks against the API server, returns a client, and then that client is used to install add-ons. And one of the add-ons is the discovery service that Devin wrote, and it also installs the kube proxy as a daemon set, and kubeDNS, which Paolo added. So it generated a token. I could have passed that in if I wanted to. And now it's going to wait for the API server to become ready and fetch one node, update tags on that node. So essentially make it unschedulable using taints and do all that stuff. And we can just look at few kubelets. So I'm logged into the same machine here. So kubelet started, it's trying to reach the API server. It hasn't got there yet. Okay. Just rebuilt all the things, so bear with me. Should work. Yeah, cool. It came up. Kubectl get nodes. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to do that. What I'm going to do, kubectl, as I said, yeah, but the tags and all the things, describe nodes, and we can see it's been tainted, dedicated master node schedule. I've checked against my XPR kubelet, and that's the current convention we're going to use from my understanding. However, we also found that some of the add-on manifests that I checked in are using something called critical add-ons only, and that seems to be like a red herring. Maybe something to discuss later. Anyway, we've got master node, and you can see it's got some pods. If we do Docker PS, also like it's running stuff, it's running Devin's image for kube discovery. It's running my image for proxy and all the Hypercube purposes, like control manager and all the guys. So cool. All right. Well, that's all right. We were gonna do some. We were gonna add some nodes, right? So where is it? This is the command I've been running, but that's not the one I want here. Anyway, SSH cloud root at where's my DigitalOcean console. So I think my first guy was going to be 04. Yeah, so 04 was the master. And we copy the IP address of one of the nodes. Copy another one. And the last one. Okay, so you can just see this. There's nothing here, right? Same on all of those. Trust me in that. And what am I going to do? Oh yeah. So well, I need to get the binaries. Docker run the user local target, and that's area developer kube installer. I'm going to copy the same thing to all of these. So I want my kubeadm join command. Well, okay, cool. Yeah. So in fact, here I can write. I don't need the. I don't need to start kubelet first, because it's not going to talk to the API. It doesn't actually care, as far as I know. API server URL. So there's little to do on this. This should become just an argument. boom, I joined here. So I'm going to copy, okay, here, and here. And now we can start kubelet. So for the nodes, the order doesn't really matter at all right now. Yeah. Enable kubelet, and then system kibble. I'll start kubelet. Okay. Okay. Well, join a few kubelet. Boom. Yeah, it's looks like it's happy, right? And kubectl get nodes back on the master. Yeah.
Woohoo!
We got this whole cluster running, and get pods, all namespaces. So the nodes that join should be getting what is it? Yeah. So proxy is being created in all of those guys, and we have DNS. We can supposedly scale up DNS to a couple more instances. Kubectl scale replicas. I don't know, 3 kubedns deployment was oh, RS obviously, yeah. No. Oh yeah, namespace kube system, yeah. Obviously, typos, yeah, okay. Okay, get RS cube system. Oh yes, okay, get deployment. Anyway, you know what's happening there. So this should be working, I believe. Scale deployment replicas 3, right? Boom. Okay, it's working now. We'll get pods, all namespaces. So yeah, well, basically they're all running now. Jesus. And we can go wide. And, I don't know. Let's like get the logs from one other machine for like a proxy or something.
Oh, this looks very cool.
Thanks. Just to sort of see if it's okay. Well, yeah, I thought this wouldn't work. Look into why log's not working. Okay, cool. So as you can see, still a little work in progress, but most functionality is there. A few things to be tested out a bit more rigorously. And now that we have the installation container, hopefully people will be able to test work in progress quite easily. Thanks very much.
Very nice. Any questions or feedback on the demo? Looking good?
Yeah, this is really amazing. Thank you. Lovely to see the progress.
Nice.
Very nice indeed. Can't wait to get that running on Raspberry Pi.
Awesome. Okay. I guess the next step would be to try deploying something to the cluster, but I'm not going to suggest you do that live right now. But I'll kick the tires later and try deploying something. As it happens, I'm speaking at a Kubernetes meetup here in San Francisco tomorrow, so I'd quite like to demo this.
Okay. Yeah, so there are a few things in terms of the PR. So besides various review comments, there are a couple of things, sort of more logistics than anything, that would be great to discuss if people don't mind right now. So one of the things is that, well, right now it has a couple of contributors other than me and Luke, and supposedly me and Luke can agree about squashing something into fewer commits, but then What about commits from Paolo and Devon and Evgeny, who who'd like to see their contribution to this? I guess I think most PRs come in from a single author usually, or are we totally fine with having PRs from different authors? Because CLA bot definitely doesn't like it, but
I think it's fine to override CLA bot. I think it's best to give everyone the credit personally. That's my opinion.
Can it be broken up into multiple PRs when it comes in?
That could probably be done too. Yeah, I mean, we can think about that, but it's kind of hard to sort of separate it all out, it seems, right now. But I haven't quite looked into that deeply. I mean, yeah. So, and the other question is obviously when could it possibly come in? I mean, I'm thinking that we can probably merge it into master at some point just before or right after 1.40 is out of the door, or when does the 1.50 window open?
Right now, I think they're only taking commits to master that are targeted at 1.4. So I think as soon as that reopens for post 1.4 features, then we can talk about getting it into master.
Smaller PRs also makes it easier to review. I expect that it's going to be out for longer for review if it's one giant chunk of code.
Yeah.
Right. And the other thing is we can get it reviewed and ready to submit ahead of time, so that as soon as the gates open, we can get it merged.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was thinking, and yeah. Well, let's see if we could possibly break it out. I'm not entirely sure. There'd be perhaps a little work on getting some of the bits of data that, like, we still have an open question around the what package do we use for creating sets. So we started some discussion around that with Lucas, I believe. Yeah. But perhaps that is obviously one little PR that could go on separately, or maybe not so little, depending.
Could the discovery and the kubeadm be merged separately? Kubeadm first with the manual discovery.
Yeah, that's definitely the intention, because they're quite separate, right? So yeah, a logical order of discovery going in first is probably a better one, but then it doesn't really matter that much at the end of the day, does it?
Sure.
Yeah, that sounds good. I think splitting it up into
Yeah.
at least 2 PRs along those lines makes sense. I don't want to go completely crazy splitting it up into tiny little pieces, but I also hear what you guys are saying about easier to review if it's smaller. There were a couple of questions on the chat here. Alex asked, I assume the sysctl enable kubelet and kubelet restart stuff is either temporary or will be documented?
Yeah, hold on a second. Let me just see, where did I do that? Enable kubelet and restart kubelet. It's actually like enable and start. And that is the case because I'm not installing it from a Debian package, which started for me. So there wasn't a restart. There was a Docker restart in my user data. I'm not sure where you stored it.
I guess I meant start, sorry. Yeah, I assume just part of the proof of concept, and once we have Debian packages, then that either goes away, or kubeadm init or the join would say, by the way, you don't actually have Docker or kubelet running, you need to do that now.
Yeah, so that's a very good question. And I mean, like, so basically what happens usually is that a Debian package would start the service that it installs, right? With a few exceptions. But like if you do apt-get install Apache, you will get Apache running right away.
I can't tell if that is the correct etiquette. I don't know if when you install a package, it's supposed to start or not. I've heard opinions both ways. Without enabling it and without starting it on the initial install for the kubelet.
Yeah.
Too much of a nit. I mean, once we have this, we can work on the next bit of making the full experience better. But like from a user guide perspective, making sure that we include all of that.
Yeah, I've also heard that that there's a distinction in between sort of Red Hat OSs versus Debian OSs on whether it's sort of standard practice to start things when you install them. So I'm going to be writing the docs, or at least I put my hand up to write the docs. So I'll make sure that we at least document the way that works, and then we can iterate on that based on different distros and their conventions.
Yeah. Also, there's so on the nodes, you really don't need to have kubelet running. You could do kubeadm join and then start the kubelet, or you can do it before. It doesn't really matter, right? But on the master, kubelet should start somewhere during at some point during kubeadm init, because kubeadm init talks to the API towards the end of its run. But it can obviously it waits forever. So user has to take time to log into any separate window and start kubelet. That's cool. We had discussed whether kubeadm could possibly shell out to like sysctl or whatever, make a dbus call or whatever that takes to start kubelet. And I think, to me, that's still on the table. I'm not against that, but what people think is to be discussed later. I guess it's kind of one of those details that we should talk about later on. Definitely.
Yeah, I'm personally sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying it will definitely come up anyway. It's like, it's not something that we have to like write notes about. It's a big thing, right?
Yeah, I have a slight preference for just making it transparent to the user what's happening. So I think documenting that you start the kubelet service is nice and clear, because people understand package managers and they understand running daemons. So, but yeah, cool. Okay, that all sounds awesome. There was another question from TST Claire.
Tim St. Clair.
Tim, sorry. Security to etcd. Maybe could you expand on that?
I'm just wondering if the connection, you set up all the client certs from the from the nodes to the master, but is the connection from the master to etcd secured?
Right. So right now, etcd is a static pod in the host network namespace, and the API server talks to it on localhost, right? We'd like to add security in the HA setting, but we haven't gone there just yet. We have the facilities to generate certs and all. It's like, we could generate a TLS cert for CD, but it's only a single instance etcd, so it's on localhost.
Cool. I think that answers the question. Does anyone object to getting this out the door with just etcd running on localhost unsecured?
For first pass, I'm not opposed at all, but once we start talking about HA, then it's going to have to be secured remote.
Absolutely. We'll probably disable API server on 8080 as well, right?
Yep.
That's what we got right now as well.
Yep. Okay, sounds good.
Whether that is with TLS is to be discussed, right? I'm pretty sure that people who are working on, like Wojcik does not want to run TLS with etcd because of CPU usage, and he would rather use a GC firewall. So that would be something that should be opt-outable.
Right.
Really? Why would? Wow.
Seems like something you could document and call it a day, but at least making clear to users what security they're getting. And if they care to make it better, since it's mostly transparent-ish, improve it.
And if you have a comment,
Very careful about enabling non-TLS modes.
Yeah, that's like, I'll go talk to Wojtek. That's I don't think I would ever say that to someone who's going to put that much money down on the line. Like, oh yeah, just put it behind a firewall. It's just a couple thousand nodes. Probably nothing important on there anyway.
this is part of the automated cluster.
Definitely on that one. Yeah. It should definitely be possible to do that easily enough.
And I also want to stress that and again, this is something that we've heard from folks who've been down this path with OpenStack, is that anything we do for just small clusters or developments does tend to leak into production. And if we don't test it, if we're not running that code all the time, then it's really easy for that code to rot and be poorly supported.
Yeah.
And so like the default for development in small clusters should be TLS. I mean, if we want to enable a non-TLS, then
so we've been talking about that on the SIG auth discussions as well. Like, there's no way that Kube is going to be properly multi-tenant unless we force that. And we learned this lesson with OpenShift. Like, OpenShift did TLS from day one, and even though it was extremely painful, it was the right decision because basically we don't even have to support HTTP now because everything just works so well. So I think like we've been discussing that enough that like we might even go down that path of just turning off all ways of getting insecure access unless you jump through a lot of hoops.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that approach. I'm also a tiny bit skeptical about the CPU usage argument, but I don't know the numbers.
It shows up in the 1,000 node kubemark clusters, but I mean, it's all stuff that we have to go fix anyway. It's more, I think he's trying to get those tests to be as representative as possible of the real environment. So we've discussed that 6 scale before.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean the only thing that I don't know. The only reason I'd hold back on adding TLS to the etcd part is that to keep this PR relatively small for the MVP, because we already saying it's quite big, and we're thinking of splitting it up. So maybe getting the APR lined up after it, and getting something small merged and reviewed first. Maybe a thing, if that helps. Yeah, so I don't know what's next on the agenda, but just before we jump off to other topics, one thing I'd like to discuss that been on my mind is like, how do we handle any advanced flags in this? So right now, I just sort of have an ad hoc thingy which reads environment variables prefixed to this cube and picks up like all a list of environment variables that it cares about, like hypercube image and a few others. And the list keeps growing, and there are certainly some of those that users will very much care about in certain cases. So I was thinking perhaps instead of environment variables, we could pass a JSON file that would include advanced flags. Maybe something that we could also dump for the user so they have a starting point if they care about advanced flags. But the thing was, or YAML, exactly, Lucas, whichever of those. But something that doesn't leak through into --help with all the kind of nonsense that there may be.
Can I two versions? We're going to have a couple of flags that are going to be pretty common that people want to use, like flags to specify the token instead of having it auto-generate, and then we're going to have another set of flags that are much less common but more advanced users are going to want to use that you don't want in the help text because it just clutters up the user experience. That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, essentially, yeah. But I mean, well, so do you think maybe we could just group flags and not the advanced ones in the default help summary? Maybe that's the thing.
So maybe there's another question too, is how many flags do we anticipate? Because certainly I can imagine this getting into the 10s or 30s of flags. Do we at some point want to have a more advanced subcommand for init or join?
Yeah, well, so the CLI does already have like a kubeadm manual as a subcommand. And that was the way that I was like hiding the advanced functionality somewhere. In the CLI. Can I also just like propose a distinction between the environment variables and the flags? And I propose that we only use the environment variables for debugging.
So what I was suggesting is that that's right. We could use environment variables, but then you have like X many environment variables, and what those are, it's like, and then some of those environment variables might be quite useful for the user. Maybe there are some like very debugging specific ones, but then what I'm thinking is that maybe you could just have a config files that has all the environment variables alike type things. So what we currently use for environment variables, we could just read from a file instead.
One question I was going to ask is, are all of these flags which of the flags would be things that administrators should repeatedly use? And those probably belong in a config file or a config API object, not flags down the road, right? Like if you have to repeatedly do it, it should be in a locked form.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. I mean, something like I've used this hypercube image, but then like some people might want to use different cluster DNS. There are two CIDR variables that we'd have to set as well, and it's I mean the environment variables are too kind of like too vague, really. If we had a file that could be somewhat validated a little better and.
Yeah, we try not to use environment variables anywhere in Cube except for like one or two things. And so, you know, like a couple of very specific contextual overrides. So that may guide us a little bit.
There's a component config API group, which sounds very similar to what you're describing. And it has not been exposed yet, but the goal is to move most components to using file-based configuration. So I'd check out that API group, and I think it's reasonable to add an API object for kubeadm.
Yeah, and I think that API object may contain some kind of nested references to component configs for the actual components that it spins up, like whether it does static pods or whatnot. So maybe that's something we should talk about a bit more. I don't understand enough config as it currently stands. But
Mike, can you give me the 30-second how component config changes or uses or leverages or differs from config maps?
Yeah, it's so all right, config.
Sorry, maybe it's not a 30-second question.
Each component has config that can be grouped into 3 buckets. There's how do I talk to the API? This API discovery. How does the API trust me? That's TLS bootstrap, and then there's everything else. These are called component configs. These are like sync loop intervals, and all the various flags that you can set on each component. They should be read from files. As when we have self-hosting, we will inject these from the API into pods running the components or whatever components using config maps.
Okay, so component config may use config maps. Is that?
Component config is a file format. It could be injected into a running pod using a config map.
Okay, gotcha.
It's structured config, version structured, migratable, validatable config.
Okay, so it's how we specify the config. It's the form of the config is the component config, and then the how it gets in there, config maps may be a way that gets done.
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Cool. So I just have one comment on the topic of like the config file for kubeadm, which is just that I really, really, really want to minimize the complexity that we expose to the user in terms of sort of the cognitive overhead that they need to get started with. That doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I just want to make sure that we have a supported happy path which doesn't require config files.
Oh yeah, absolutely. This is just for those who want to optimize certain things. And it seems like a safer way for them would be to just have a file rather than look up environment variables in some place.
Okay.
I do like the idea of the sort of the manual advanced stuff being file based, because at some point you hit the limit of what you can do with command line flags, and then that actually seems to slot well into the not having a separate command for the manual stuff.
Yeah. I guess my question is just, do we see this as sort of a phase 2 thing? Otherwise we end up drifting into features.
Probably just yeah. I mean, all I wanted to do is identify a direction, because I've introduced a bunch of environment variables, and there's a to-do node to do something better, and we started talking about some of the things that would go in there, such as what was it, whether etcd should have TLS or whatnot, and that falls into the topic of the advanced parameters.
So my opinion is getting the way that we do advanced stuff down early is going to be useful, and then plumbing through the individual aspects that we need, that stuff can wait to as needed, or we can try and get ahead of that for phase 2. But I think having at least the path sort of, blazed there will make it easier for people to see how we can grow this into handling more situations as necessary. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, makes sense to me. So I guess the direction that you wanted, Ilya, is that this probably could be a component config. Are you happy with that as a direction? Is that what you need?
Yeah, that's fine. Just, I mean,
Okay.
my main argument was file-based is better, and component config is the format for files like that. So let's stick to that.
Cool. Sounds good. Joe, you are SIG scale, is that right?
Yeah, unfortunately, this is, I was logged in with the wrong account.
I think I'm cluster ops today, so hey ho. You said you have to run soon, but you have a question.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to give a quick snapshot. Me and Clayton had some discussions around the Discovery API. It's a long thread. I mean, I don't think we have conclusion there yet, but I think I can do at least a decent job of stating some of Clayton's concerns here. So the first one is coming up with a new format versus using the current kube config format, because the cluster location stuff that we have is, it looks like an evolved form, but do we have to solve all these problems at once, or can we reuse the existing kube config? I've been sort of spelunking through that code and that support there to see how applicable that is. The second thing is creating a new, okay, so when you look at the discovery stuff, there's the endpoint that is JWS backed or authenticated, and then there's the stuff for getting this stuff sort of at regular runtime and updating stuff. And there was the question of whether that config, whether that cluster location can be served, whether it needs to be a new API or whether it's something that can be bound into config maps and reuse config maps for actually distributing this. And as we look for reusing config maps for both, parts of the system that are running explicitly, the system level components versus applications, that doesn't seem insane to me to try and see if we can reuse that. The second current concern there was really one of, do we need to do the JWS stuff at all? Can we instead actually just push a kube config that's base64 encoded as something on the command line? That's the one where I think, I might have moved Clayton a little bit on that copying, a page full of like random text is going to be a bad user experience. And there's also the scenarios where you want to generate the token outside of the flow, give that, and then have the token expire after a certain amount of time. And so I'm gonna try and sort of think deep about some of the stuff that Clayton said, and maybe come up with an alternate that integrates some of those ideas. The last issue, and this came up from a different meeting, was as we move towards HA, there's this general problem of if you don't have DNS, if you don't have a load balancer, then you essentially need to push naming information down to clients as the cluster changes. And one of the analogies that I used here is like, I don't have any cells in my body that are the same as when I was born, everything, but I am still me, right? So there's the same idea of a cluster. As we replace cluster master components, it's still the same logical cluster, but none of the servers that were there originally when that thing was birthed are still there. So the question really is that, in that situation where you don't have professionally run DNS, where you don't have a load balancer that you can trust, do we need to support this idea of updating clients with the latest TLS certificates and the latest IP addresses? Because that ends up building in a bunch of complexity, and we're essentially rebuilding a DNS-ish type of thing, or a poor man's discovery here as we do this stuff. And I think that's a larger question as we look towards HA, is do we want to support HA in that sort of like, I don't have a DNS server scenario? So this is so Tim is like, will always be load balance plus VIP today. I think, and this I think is some of the skewed experience that the Red Hat folks have, is that they're going into enterprises and is being driven top down from IT, and I think there's going to be a lot of scenarios where standing up internal facing load balancing is actually yet another thing to manage. Yeah. And competitive. So I think there's good arguments on both sides there, and so I think we have to look pretty carefully in terms of how much complexity this is going to add and what the experience is going to be here. So I don't want to, I don't think we need to close on that particular one right now, but it's definitely something that's gonna have to be discussed.
Cool, that was really helpful summary. Thank you, Joe. I mean, for what it's worth, I'm pretty strongly supportive of Kubernetes where necessary, like implementing that complexity so that the user doesn't have to. I think you should be able to install HA Kubernetes on computers running Linux. without dependencies on external infrastructure.
Yeah, and I have no doubt that we can get it so that you can install HA Kubernetes in that case. I think whether that that thing stays healthy over time as things come and go and how dynamic that master set is and how well that's supported. I think that's
I think it's important to remember too, like ultimately the job of Kubernetes is to be a cluster manager, and cluster managers need to do two things: make it easy for things to stay running on them and keep themselves running. And today people do keep themselves running outside. And so if we can get it running inside, we can leverage all the same tools. That would be a significant competitive advantage across every other cluster solution that's ever been created in the history of mankind. The challenge is that every other cluster management system in the history of mankind has failed to implement its own HA innately, so we should be cautious about that.
Yeah, we definitely, as we do this stuff, we want to make sure that, we make this stuff optional such that, relying on your battle-tested, high available internal DNS system continues to work, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Something to add, I think it will definitely come up again when we get to the topic of, how does kubelet rediscover the master? Is it like, is kubeadm going to run again, or is kubelet going to have some built-in way of refetching its config? When should it do it, like on failure or what? I don't know. I mean, because like, do we have the requirement of master having static IP still, or do we change that?
So I don't have an answer right now, and I don't think we necessarily it's like top of the list right now. But I just wanted to at least put it on folks' radar that this is some of the stuff we're talking about.
Cool.
All right, I got to run.
All right, thanks, Joe. See you later. Cool. There was a question about I'd like to see a way to specify an external TLS-enabled etcd cluster.
Yeah, this is just, since HA etcd is being pushed off, some way to enable a workflow that would allow the use of HA etcd would be nice to have. That way we can start getting some more production type deployments using this and start getting some of that feedback earlier in the cycle than we would if that was not there.
Cool. Yeah, I agree with that. I think the question is sort of what would kubeadmin need to do? Would it need to just not set up etcd and say like, hey, everyone, like let's assume etcd is already running on every host and can be talked to over localhost?
I would say just, defer etcd altogether in that case and just, give it a list of etcd endpoints to use and potentially the client certificates needed. Even if the client certificates need to be in a predetermined location, I think that's still a decent trade-off.
Okay.
I think we should discuss what we want the eventual scope of kubeadmin to be, whether we want it to be an opinionated deployment or a highly configurable deployment. I think that if we take a lot of the stuff that kubeadmin does today and move them into like kubelet, make it responsible for doing the discovery and TLS dance, then it should be really straightforward for somebody to build a highly configurable deployment using the technology that kubeadmin is using. I'm hesitant on building out a really large configuration file for kubeadmin, as the original goal was opinionated and not configurable, but maybe hackable. That might be just my opinion, but.
Right. I mean, if you look at like the kube-up stuff that everybody hates, the config default.sh is effectively a very large configuration file of environment variables, which is impossible for anybody to understand what any of them do and what the side effects are. I think that's one of the things we're trying to avoid with kubeadmin.
I think this is a case where we have to look at the needs that are driving people to want that and come up with a coherent story across all of this. And if the coherent story is, 5 different deploy systems, great. If the coherent story is one more configurable one.
Yeah.
I think we've hypothetically named a couple, right? So we have I want to lay out a bunch of machines that are going to receive Cube. And that's kind of more classic config management or Terraform or CloudFormations. And then there's the I want to bootstrap kube, and there might be 2 or 3 variations we've discussed already. But it may be that in the short term, we want to make sure that there's somebody who's doing the alternative to bootstrapping and trying to align it with where we want kube to go, where we want kubeadmin to go, I mean.
I posit it's larger. It's not just where we want kubeadmin to go, but as part of lifecycle, we should have a broader understanding of which kubeadmin is, one component or maybe the only majorly supported component. That's where I think we have the open question.
I think that Phillips from CoreOS actually has a proposal to merge bootkube, which is an opinionated way to bootstrap your Kubernetes cluster, and kubeadmin. So eventually there's that, so we can pick it up. The second thing I wanted to add about etcd, I'm going to sync with Elia during this week, and I'll try and deliver both local and external etcd with TLS. The only thing that concerns me is some comment I saw on chat about the rotation of the certificates, but I believe that for an MVP, if I don't concern about that, it should be okay.
Okay. Mike, you said you have a question.
Yeah, it's a little bit technical about the design of kubeadmin. Kubeadmin does a couple of things right now. It does a discovery process and a TLS bootstrap process. I was wondering if you saw that functionality moving into the kubelet. I guess the difference between kubeadmin and kubelet is one, kubeadmin is a main that terminates, and kubelet is a long-running process. And I think that kubelet will be used in more deployments than kubeadmin in general. So for implementing stuff like certificate rotation for both client certificates and for the CA cert, do you see that it makes more sense to move it into kubelet? I had touched on this, but I hadn't asked anybody yet.
I think in general, it does make sense.
Yeah. So I mean, I can say something a little bit more specific. Because basically, I mean, from my point of view, it's any functionality that we could put from kubeadm into kubelet or remove the need for having that in the first place in kubeadm is good, and keep kubeadm as a CLI that user will interact with. And if its footprint becomes slimmer, that's totally fine. That's probably the perfect outcome, really.
Sure. Okay. So I had thrown that on the graduation requirements, and I hadn't asked anybody if that was a good idea yet. So I will keep it there. So that would be for the beta release. We should have we should know where these things are going to go by that point in time.
That makes sense. At one point, I had sort of a design which involved kubeadmin writing out like some hints to a little file that kubelet then picks up and kubelet runs with. And that would allow, that sort of thing would allow us to move more of the functionality into kubelet. We just need to figure out what the RPC is there, I think. Because you want to start the same kubelet on all the nodes. You don't want to have to put any special flags in the kubelet.
Right. We have had a general discussion on how to improve the kubelets API for creating static pods and for all the other things that we need to do. So maybe we can carry that forward with SIG node or something. I think they have a lot of ideas on what they want to do.
Yeah, and like the dynamic kubelet settings sounds like very much the kind of thing. Dig into what it does exactly.
It's possible. I think the dynamic kubelet settings is mostly for the third bucket of configuration, which is passed down from the config map. So it assumes connectivity to the API server. But I think that there's talk about adding a REST endpoint or a gRPC endpoint for creating static pods, and just advancing the creating a Unix socket to communicate configuration to the kubelet, and having a general interface for interacting with a kubelet that is not file based.
Yeah, and maybe we could expand to not just static pods, but a few more things there, right?
Yeah, sure.
That makes sense. That makes total sense to me. So yeah, I think we should aim for moving things like the TLS bootstrapping into kubelet once we have less of this constraint over, well, we can't change kubelet in time for 1.4 now. Like once we get the initial first pass out, then that's definitely seems like a sensible direction to me.
Yeah, let's discuss this early in the 1.5 time frame.
Cool. Okay, so I'm just conscious that we have 5 minutes left, and there are some things that we haven't got to on the agenda yet. I think we have talked a little bit about the phase 2 stuff. That's a broad discussion. It's not going to fit in 5 minutes, but Devon had a question he wanted an answer to, which is about the future of the discovery API. Are we proceeding or in need of an updated proposal? Are we targeting the core API, or do we want it to stay a standalone pod? Any thoughts on that?
I think Joe would be the best person to answer that. But I think you're just discussing the JWS portion of it, of the discovery proposal.
Yeah, I think so.
Unfortunately, Joe has already left.
Damn it. Okay, we'll have to do this asynchronously then. Never mind. Unless anyone wants to try channeling Joe. No, we'll have to ask him. Okay, I will tag him. Next was an update on the debs. Was that you, Mike?
Yeah, I sent out another PR that refactors how we are building those packages, and I got some comments that I need to revise, but there should be in the stable Xennial, there should be packages for kube control and kubelet and Kubernetes CNI at 1.3.6, and in the unstable there should be 1.4.0 beta 0. So those should be working right now. I will try to test on as many distributions as I have available to me, but obviously I'm open to expanding to the number of distributions. If you guys have one that you need, definitely send a PR to add it.
Cool, and I guess just in general, it would be good to get people hammering on those packages sooner rather than later.
Yeah, definitely.
Just one question you didn't mention, but presumably kubeadm is also in those packages?
Yeah, I don't know where to build it from, and I don't know when to build it. So kubeadm will be a separate package, but give me a place to build it from, and I will build it and package it.
That would be awesome. I'd love to start testing that all end to end. So I guess Ilya's fork is probably the best bet.
I have not gotten really good at automated building and publishing of these packages yet. It's a work in progress, but I can do like weekly or bi-weekly pushes of like the bleeding edge kubeadm.
Cool. That would be really good. I think we're getting close to a level of stability, maybe, that we want to start doing that and then circulating them a little bit more widely to get some more eyeballs on it.
I'm thinking to post the instructions for the demo on the general list after the call, or early tomorrow. What do people think about that?
I think it's fine. Cool. Okay, we have 50 seconds left. Does anyone want to talk about Flannel or discovery pods on GCR.io?
Discovery pods.
Okay.
Oh, is that about Devon's this Cube discovery service going getting packaged in the container and published on GCR?
I think so, yes.
Yeah.
I think from a previous call, Mike offered to do that for us, maybe?
Yeah, tell me where they are and I can publish them. And hopefully it will become automated eventually.
We just need to give you more binaries to package.
Yes, please.
Fantastic. Okay, cool. We're over time. That was a really good call. Thank you, everyone. And especially big thank you to Ilya for demoing your and Devon and everyone else's work. And thank you, everyone who's jumped on board and got it working. It's a real achievement. Okay, thanks, everyone. Ciao.